The stars above New Eridani burned with a cold, indifferent light, as if they too were witnesses to the slaughter unfolding below. Smoke choked the skies of the once thriving colony, turning the sun into a pale, bloodshot eye. In the streets, flames clawed at buildings, their glass faces shattering into brilliant shards of despair. People screamed, metal and flesh alike, a chorus swallowed by the guttural roar of descending Zerethian warships. Commander Elias Vane stood on the observation deck of the Resolute, the flagship of Earth's colonial defense forces. His jaw was rigid, his eyes narrowed like steel-tipped arrows. A tremor ran through the ship's reinforced hull as another section of the outer defenses fell, but Elias didn't flinch. The galaxy had chosen its path. Now it would learn what a cornered species could do. "Commander, outer shields on Sector 7 are gone. Zerethian landing parties have breached the perimeter." Lieutenant Jorn Morrow's voice was tight with strain, his fingers dancing across the cracked, flickering control console. Sweat beaded on his brow. "We're losing the colony, sir." Elias turned slowly, his movement deliberate. He wasn't young anymore. War had etched itself into the lines of his face, carved resilience into the set of his shoulders. His voice, when it came, was like stone grinding against stone. "We haven't lost yet." "Sir?" Jorn blinked up at him, his wide eyes betraying disbelief. Around them, the bridge buzzed with chaos. Red emergency lights pulsing in time with alarms, the acrid tang of ozone from overloaded circuits stinging the air, smoke curling into frantic electric spirals. Elias's hand hovered over the ship's main comms relay, his gaze fixed beyond the shattered viewports. Out there, Zerethian dreadnoughts loomed like obsidian leviathans, their jagged spines bristling with energy weapons. Smaller cruisers, faster, sleeker, swarmed like vultures through the colony's defenses, picking off anything that still moved. On the ground, their soldiers spilled from landing ships, armored in sleek black exosuits that swallowed the light, like specters of annihilation. The Dominion's warlord, Ulkor Veskar, had brought death to New Eridani. Elias drew a long breath, feeling the burn of smoke at the back of his throat. "Patch me through to every remaining colony, every outpost, every ship still breathing. I need them to hear this." "Yes, Commander." The comms crackled to life with an audible snap. Elias took a step forward, the weight of the moment settling over him like an invisible yoke. Behind him, his officers stilled, as if the stillness of their commander might hold the chaos at bay. Elias's voice, low and deliberate, rolled through the silence. "This is Commander Elias Vane of Earth's Defense Fleet. To all listening, this message is not for surrender. It is not for the faint of heart. This is for those of you who still have fire in your veins, for those who refuse to kneel." His words hung there, a calm eye in the hurricane of destruction. The Zerethian Dominion believes humanity to be a broken species, primitive, weak. They look at us and see only dust. But they forget. They forget that dust can turn to ash, and ash can rise again. Somewhere across the deck, Jorn's sharp intake of breath punctuated the moment. Elias let the silence stretch before speaking again. "We will not beg. We will not hide. If Earth is to fall, it will fall like a dying star, burning so brightly that the heavens themselves will remember us." As he spoke, Elias thought of New Eridani. He thought of the families cowering in cellars, of children being swept up into their parents' arms as the sky tore apart above them. He thought of the weight of their trust, a weight he carried now, cold and heavy in his chest. The Dominion's assault was swift, but Elias knew the truth. Humanity's true strength was time, time to rally, time to strike, time to remind the galaxy that they were never prey. Jorn broke the stillness. "Commander, Zerethian ships are repositioning. They're broadcasting. Put it on screen." The view shifted, filling the shattered windows with the arrogant sneer of warlord Ulkor Veskar. His golden-black armor glinted like molten obsidian, and his eyes, frosted and cruel, held the cold weight of inevitability. Behind him, the bodies of fallen colonists lay sprawled in the crimson haze of New Eridani's burning fields. Veskar's voice oozed malice, the words slithering like poison. "Humans," Vesker began, his lip curling upward. "Your defiance is as meaningless as your lives. I have claimed your colonies. I will burn your Earth. You are insects, trapped, squirming, futile. Submit now, and perhaps some will survive to serve." Elias did not respond immediately. Instead, he studied Veskar, measuring the warlord's smugness. He spoke not to Veskar, but to his officers. "Do you see it?" Elias asked softly, his voice a shadow of itself. "See what, sir?" Yorn whispered. "Their confidence," Elias murmured, his eyes narrowing. "They believe victory is theirs, and that belief is their weakness." He turned back to the comms relay. Veskar's image remained, leering at them like a predator watching trapped prey. Elias leaned forward, his voice cutting through the signal like a scalpel. "Warlord Veskar," Elias said, voice cold as a tomb, "you will regret the day you set foot on human soil. You think we are insects, but you have never stepped into a hornet's nest." Veskar's expression faltered for the briefest moment, a crack in the polished veneer. Elias saw it, and his lips curled upward in a grim semblance of a smile. "I hope your ships are ready, Warlord," Elias continued, his voice steady, "because this isn't the end. This is the beginning of your ruin." Vesker snarled, his sharp teeth bared like blades. "Empty words, human. The Dominion—" Elias cut the feed. Silence fell across the bridge, save for the quiet hum of machines straining to hold the ship together. Yorn swallowed hard. "Commander, what now?" Elias straightened, his back a pillar of unyielding stone. "We fight. Signal every surviving fleet and every colony with ships capable of movement. We retreat to Earth, regroup, and prepare. And Yorn—" "Sir?" Elias's eyes burned with a fire that made the lieutenant straighten involuntarily. "Tell them to keep listening for the stars. There's a signal coming, a warning carried on starlight, and when it arrives, the Zarethians will remember why humanity survives." The Resolute jolted again as the Dominion's forces broke through the last of the outer defenses. Across the viewport, Elias watched the flames devour New Eridani. His fists tightened at his sides, and he spoke softly, his words almost a whisper. "You wanted a war? You've woken a storm." The bridge lights flickered. Somewhere alarms screamed, but Commander Elias Vane did not waver. The galaxy had turned its back on humanity, and the Zarethians had dared to knock on the gates of Earth. Soon, they would find out what was waiting inside. The Resolute cut through the void like a wounded predator, trailing smoke and flickering light as it sped toward the edge of New Eridani's system. The Zarethian cruisers swarmed in pursuit, their hulls gleaming like obsidian knives against the distant stars. The colony was gone. Elias knew this. But its loss was not the death knell the Dominion expected it to be. It was fuel, rage that simmered beneath the surface of every survivor, waiting to erupt. Elias stood at the center of the command bridge, unyielding as the bulkheads groaned from the stress of the ship's acceleration. Around him, his officers worked in frantic concert, hands flying across consoles, voices sharp and hurried. Smoke curled from shattered control panels, acrid and stinging as it wormed its way into lungs. Jorn coughed behind him, choking on the remnants of burning circuits. "They're gaining on us, Commander," Jorn barked, his voice raw. "2 cruisers closing the gap, one on starboard, one aft." Elias's eyes remained locked on the front viewport, where the black emptiness of space seemed to stretch infinitely. "Are there any systems still operational?" Calder Wren, the engineer Elias had dragged onto this doomed ship days prior, shoved himself up from beneath a sparking conduit smudged with grease and ash. "Operational? No, but I can give you something that might make them reconsider." "Do it," Elias said without hesitation. His voice carried no edge, no desperation, only cold, calculated resolve. Calder wiped the sweat from his brow and began wrenching levers on a nearby console. "Rerouting power from auxiliary reactors. Hull plating's fried anyway. Hope you like fireworks, Commander." From the viewport, the Zarethian cruisers loomed larger, their hulls alive with pulsing weapon systems. Elias could see them charging, the crimson glow of particle cannons threading through their spines, burning like hellfire. Then Calder slammed his fist onto a manual release and a searing flash erupted behind the Resolute. The blast wave hit like a thunderclap in silence, rippling through the void. The pursuing ships staggered, their shields flaring like molten glass. One spun into a lazy spiral as its stabilizers sputtered, flames chewing through its aft section. The other, blinded momentarily, pulled back just enough for the Resolute to lurch forward into the dark. Jorn let out a shaky breath. They've fallen back, just for now. Enough time to reach Earth, Elias said. He turned to Jorn. Open communications. I need every colony, every ship still listening to hear this. Jorn's hands flew across the console, and moments later, the comms panel flickered to life with faint static. Across the galaxy, Earth's scattered remnants would hear what came next. His words, their last rallying cry. Elias stepped forward. The bridge seemed to contract around him, the hum of failing engines a low, constant dirge in the background. His breath slowed as he spoke, his voice cutting through the static like a blade through silk. This is Commander Elias Vane of Earth. The Zarethian Dominion believes humanity has been broken. They have razed our colonies, slaughtered our people. They think this will bring silence. He paused, letting the stillness settle over his words. Around him the crew stopped what they were doing to listen. Even Calder froze, grease-streaked hands hovering above his tools. But humanity does not go quietly, Elias continued, his voice low and certain, reverberating through the bridge. We are not whispers in the dark. We are thunder waiting to be heard. For centuries we've fought among ourselves, survived fires of our own making. And while they see our scars as weakness, we know them for what they are. Proof. He looked to the viewport as though speaking directly to the stars beyond. Proof that we endure. Proof that when the storm comes, we will stand. And when you look for us in the ashes, we will not be gone. He took a breath, steadying the weight in his chest. To every ship still flying, every hand still raised, I have one message. Prepare, because humanity's last defense is waking up, and the Dominion will learn. If they wanted silence, they came to the wrong planet. Calder let out a soft whistle under his breath. Jorn sat frozen, hands hovering motionless over his console. Around them, the bridge was still except for the faint hum of machinery. Elias finally turned to Jorn. End transmission. The comms line cut with a low snap, leaving only silence in its wake. Somewhere in the galaxy, Elias knew, those words were rippling outward, carried on starlight into systems that might have forgotten Earth existed. His warning wasn't just for the Dominion, it was for everyone. The oppressed, the frightened, the dormant flames waiting for a spark. Commander, Jorn said quietly, his voice breaking the heavy stillness. If what you said is true, if the sleeper fleets really exist, how do we wake them? Elias's jaw tightened, his gaze distant. We find the codes, Calder snorted. Easier said than done, sir. Half of Earth's military history is buried in scrap and forgotten databases. If sleeper fleets exist, no one alive knows where they are. Elias turned to Calder, his steel-gray eyes boring into the engineer. You're wrong. Someone does. Calder blinked. Who? The relay stations, Elias said, a hard edge in his voice. Centuries ago, humanity hid weapons in the dark corners of the galaxy, waiting for a moment like this. The codes were tied to relay points, ancient satellites that could connect all human networks no matter the distance. Calder's expression fell. You're not suggesting what I think you are? Elias nodded. I am. There's one relay left intact. Sector Theta 9 Yorn paled. But that system was seized by the Dominion months ago. It's crawling with their ships. Then we'll take it back, Elias said simply, as though stating an inevitability. He turned to Calder. Get me schematics on any stealth systems we can rig to this ship. Jorn, alert Zara Holt. Her fleet remnants will rendezvous with us at Theta 9. We're going in. The crew exchanged hesitant glances, but there was no mistaking the determination that flowed from their commander like an unseen current. Jorn swallowed hard, his voice quiet. "And if the codes aren't there?" "They're there," Elias replied, without hesitation. "They have to be." Outside the viewport, the stars blurred as the Resolute tore through space, its hull shaking like an exhausted runner sprinting toward a final line. Elias turned his back to the chaos behind him and stared at the stars, his expression carved in stone. He could see it. Earth's skies burning, families hiding in darkness, hope slipping through grasping fingers. The Dominion thought they could wipe out a species by targeting colonies and cities. They didn't understand the truth. Humanity wasn't a collection of buildings. It wasn't technology. Humanity was what remained when all else was stripped away, an unrelenting will, a spark that refused to die. As the ship sped toward Theta 9, Elias spoke softly to himself, his words like a vow. "We will rise, and they will remember." The Resolute tore into the Theta 9 system like a specter, a scarred warship against the infinite black. Around it, the void hummed with quiet tension. Somewhere unseen, Zarethian eyes were watching, waiting. Elias Vane stood at the command deck, his silhouette carved into the faint glow of dying monitors. This was no longer a ship of pride, but a vessel of grim purpose, dragged from ruin and hurled toward salvation. "Stealth field holding," Calder Wren reported, wiping grime from his forehead with the back of his hand. "Barely. I've patched more holes in this ship than there's hull left, but she'll hold together, I think." Elias's gray eyes didn't waver from the star-streaked viewport. Ahead, Theta 9 hung like a ghost on the edge of deep space, a shattered relay station drifting in a slow orbit around a dead gray moon. Cracks split the station's surface like veins of rot, its jagged edges scarred from a forgotten age. Time had picked at its bones, leaving it a drifting corpse. Yet inside, Elias knew, it pulsed with secrets. "Scan for Zarethian patrols," Elias said, his voice a low growl. Lieutenant Jorn's fingers danced across his controls. "There's movement around the station. Small ships. Scanners show at least 4 Zarethian corvettes in close orbit. No dreadnoughts. Yet." "They're guarding something," Elias muttered. Calder gave a dry chuckle from behind his engineering station. "Guarding or looting? Bet my last bottle of whiskey they don't know what they're sitting on." "They don't need to know," Elias said darkly. "If they stop us, it doesn't matter." The air on the bridge felt brittle, as if the wrong word might shatter it. Elias could see it in their faces. The tension, the fear barely held at bay. Theta 9 was their one shot. If the codes were here, Earth's last defense could be awakened. If not, there would be no return to Earth. Elias turned to Admiral Zara Holt, whose image flickered on the holocom. Her dark uniform was stained with soot, her short hair slicked back with sweat. She looked like what she was, a woman holding together the fraying edges of humanity's fleet. "My forces are ready, Commander," Zara said. Her voice held no hint of doubt, only the cold professionalism of someone who had accepted death as a companion. "We'll draw their attention long enough for you to infiltrate the station. Don't waste the chance." "We won't," Elias promised. "If we find the codes, this ends today." Zara nodded. "Good hunting. Holt out." The holocom flickered off, and Jorn released a shaky breath. "They're outnumbered, sir. If Zara's fleet draws fire—" "Then they'll buy us time," Elias cut in. "Time is the only currency left that matters." The bridge fell silent again, save for the steady hum of the Resolute's patched engines. Elias turned toward Calder. "Prep the boarding team. We go in 5 minutes." Calder straightened, his eyes narrowing. "If I'm crawling through that scrap heap, I'm bringing a toolkit and a gun." "You'll need both," Elias said. 5 minutes later, the Resolute crept closer to the relay station's orbit. Zara's fleet burst from the dark with the fury of a dying star, ships ragged, weapons blazing. Zarethian corvettes turned like startled beasts, shifting fire onto the new threat. Zara's forces fought like cornered wolves, darting in and out of Zarethian formations, drawing the Dominion's focus further from the station. Elias's strike team, launched from the Resolute, in a battered drop shuttle. The ship trembled, metal groaning under the strain as it hurtled toward the station. Inside, Elias sat strapped into the front seat, his gloved hands steady against his thighs. Across from him, Calder fiddled with a glowing diagnostic pad, muttering curses under his breath. "You look too calm for someone about to walk into Zarethian territory," Calder said, trying for humor, though his voice cracked on the last word. "Calm is the one thing we have left to hold on to," Elias replied. The drop shuttle jolted as it pierced the relay station's weak gravitational pull. From the small viewport, the station loomed ever closer, its jagged silhouette sharp against the dim light of a faraway star. Burned metal and drifting debris wove an eerie halo around its surface, like a graveyard orbiting a forgotten shrine. "Landing in 20 seconds, barked the pilot, his knuckles white against the controls. Elias's voice cut through the hum of the ship. "Once we're inside, no mistakes. Calder, you find the codes. Jorn, you secure our exit. We move fast and we move quiet." "Quiet isn't my specialty," Calder muttered. "Make it one." The shuttle slammed onto the station's surface with a teeth-rattling thud. The rear hatch hissed open, flooding the hold with cold, stale air. Elias unstrapped himself and stepped out first. The silence hit him like a wall, thick, suffocating, broken only by the faint creaks of the station shifting under its own weight. The interior was a tomb of shadows. Walls cracked from age curved like ribs around them, flickering with the dim light of old consoles. A stale, metallic smell lingered, as though the station itself had exhaled its final breath centuries ago. "Stay close," Elias whispered, his voice barely audible. Calder moved ahead, the glow from his diagnostic pad illuminating the narrow path before them. The team's boots clanged against the metal grating, the sound carrying like distant gunfire. Jorn flanked them, his rifle raised, sweeping the darkness for threats. As they moved deeper, Elias's gaze swept the walls. Faded symbols lined the corridors, ancient human markings, reminders of a forgotten era when humanity reached for the stars without fear. They passed consoles coated in layers of dust, their screens dark. The quiet stretched, heavy and unnatural. Then Calder stopped. "Found it." Elias stepped up beside him, staring at a massive control terminal embedded in the wall. Its surface glowed faintly, veins of energy pulsing in erratic rhythms, as though the station itself were stirring from slumber. Calder began typing furiously, fingers dancing across the console's cracked interface. "Give me 5 minutes, maybe less." "You've got 3, Elias said, voice clipped. The station shuddered, a groaning sound that reverberated through the walls like a giant stirring in its sleep. Jorn froze, his rifle trained on a corridor leading deeper into darkness. "Movement," Jorn hissed. "Zarethians!" From the far end of the corridor, armored shadows appeared, Zarethian soldiers in black exosuits, their visors glowing red. The air grew electric as weapons charged, the hum of plasma growing louder. Elias's voice snapped through the tension. "Hold them back!" Jorn fired first, his rifle barking as plasma bolts tore through the dark. Zarethian soldiers returned fire, streaks of red and green ripping through the corridor. The walls flashed with every shot, bathing the team in chaotic bursts of light and shadow. Calder didn't look up, his focus absolute. "Almost there!" Elias crouched beside Jorn, his own rifle in hand, firing with precision. Each shot dropped a soldier, but more came, emerging like nightmares born of the dark. The control terminal's hum grew louder. Calder grinned, his voice triumphant. "Got it! The codes are transferring." The station trembled violently as deep within its systems, something ancient and immense began to wake. A low, resonant hum filled the air, like the growl of a sleeping giant opening its eyes. "Commander!" Jorn shouted. "We've got to go!" Elias grabbed Calder's collar, yanking him back from the console. "Move! Now!" As they sprinted toward the shuttle, a sound echoed through the station, deeper, louder than anything Elias had ever heard. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't human. It was a sound like the voice of the void itself, and it whispered of something vast and powerful rising from slumber. Behind them, the Zarethians faltered, their weapons lowering as they turned to face the awakening hum. Their glowing visors dimmed, as though they, too, understood what they had awakened. "Commander," Calder panted, his voice tinged with awe, "what did we just do?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. Somewhere in the galaxy, humanity's last defense had begun to stir. The Resolute raced away from the shattered remains of Theta 9, its engines straining as the ship broke free of the station's gravitational pull. Behind them, the relay hummed with a sound no mortal ear had heard in centuries, a deep, resonant vibration that seemed to echo through the bones of the universe. Elias Vane stood on the bridge, silent as the station fell away in the rear viewport, a dark, fractured silhouette against the stars. "Commander!" Calder Wren gasped from his chair, his voice still tinged with disbelief. "It's happening! The signal's spreading! I don't even know how. It's like the relay's amplifying it through every old human network out there. It's alive," Elias finished, his tone quiet and grim. He didn't look at Calder. His gaze remained fixed on the stars ahead, as though waiting for them to answer. The comm systems began to light up in quick succession, tiny red alerts blinking like a heartbeat. Jorn leaned over his console, his face pale in the dim glow of the bridge lights. "Commander, we're receiving feedback from deep space sectors. Ships, dozens of them, they're waking up. Energy spikes across uncharted regions. It's real." Elias exhaled, a slow breath that seemed to release months of tension. The codes had worked. Humanity's last desperate ace, the sleeper fleets, were awakening, rising like titans from forgotten voids. He turned toward Calder, his voice regaining its familiar edge. "Status on the Zerethians." Calder wiped sweat from his face with a grease-streaked hand. "They're moving! Fast! The ships we stirred up at Theta 9 broadcast something back to their main fleet. I'd wager everything I own that Ulcor Vesker knows what we've done." "And his response?" Elias's eyes narrowed, his shoulders rigid as iron. Jorn turned in his chair, his face grim. "Their dreadnoughts are repositioning. They're converging on Earth." The words hung in the air like a curse. "Then they're predictable," Elias replied after a moment, his tone cold as a blade. "We won't let them take Earth." "What's the plan, sir?" Jorn asked, his voice tight. Around him, the bridge crew waited, silent, their eyes fixed on Elias as though he were the center of their universe. Elias turned to the central holotable, where star charts shimmered with fragmented light. Theta 9, Earth, and distant sleeper fleet signals lit up like points of fire in the dark. He traced his fingers across the map, a predator surveying the battlefield. "Ulcor Veskar is arrogant," Elias began, his voice calm but commanding. "He's bringing everything he has to Earth, expecting us to stand and die. He wants to turn the skies into a graveyard. We won't let him." He gestured to the star charts as he outlined his plan. "Zeraholt's fleet will serve as the bait. They'll draw Vesker's dreadnoughts into a choke point at Mars's orbit. The Zerethians will see a retreating fleet and chase them, believing we're fleeing. What they won't realize is that Mars has already been seeded with surface-based railguns and pulse launchers, defensive systems Calder patched into the old mining colonies. They'll soften Vesker's forward line." Jorn blinked. "Sir, that buys us time. But their dreadnoughts will power through eventually. We need something more." Elias nodded, the faintest smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "We do. That's where the sleeper fleets come in." Calder grunted as he leaned forward, intrigued despite himself. "You're going to hide them?" "Not hide. Position," Elias replied. He pointed to distant sectors along the chart where the sleeper fleets were beginning to wake, sending intermittent pulses through human networks. "We'll pull the Zerethians into Earth's gravity well. It's where they'll feel confident, where they'll want the killing blow. Once they're locked into the fight, the sleeper fleets will strike. From behind, from above, from every angle Vesker can't see." Jorn's breath hitched. "You're turning Earth into a trap." "Yes," Elias said. His gray eyes gleamed like tempered steel. "The Zerethians think they've pinned humanity in a corner. Instead, they've walked into the lion's den." The bridge fell silent again, but this time the silence wasn't fear. It was something else, something sharp-edged and electric. Hope. Calder, Elias continued, turning to the engineer. I need you to coordinate the sleeper fleets. Every one of those ships is old, and they'll need fine-tuning to work in unison. You'll be their brain. Calder ran a hand through his disheveled hair, shaking his head. You realize that's madness, right? I'll need to pull routing systems across hundreds of old ships while avoiding whatever Dominion trickery they send to disrupt us. I'll be... The difference between victory and annihilation, Elias finished, his voice soft but unrelenting. Calder stared at him, then exhaled, shaking his head with a half-smile. Fine. Just don't blame me when I fry something. Yorn, Elias said next, prepare comms for Admiral Holt. She'll get the bait moving. I want every pilot briefed and ready. Aye, sir. Yorn's hands moved swiftly, fingers flying across the controls as orders rippled through the Resolute's systems. Elias looked back to the stars, his gaze heavy with purpose. In the silence of space, the faint signals of the sleeper fleets pulsed like the beating of a giant's heart. They were waking now, ancient weapons of a forgotten age, waiting for the call to strike. Vesker's dreadnoughts might have been the Dominion's pride, but Elias knew a truth Vesker had overlooked. The old gods still had teeth. As hours passed, the Resolute and Admiral Holt's fleet moved into their positions. Earth loomed in the distance, a pale blue marble caught between the blackness of space and the Zarethians' advancing storm. Calder worked tirelessly, patching communication relays between the sleeper fleets, his face bathed in the cold light of hundreds of overlapping schematics. Commander, Jorn said softly, his voice breaking the bridge's silence. The Zarethians are here. Elias turned slowly, his body rigid, his face carved from stone. Through the viewport, the void seemed to darken as the Dominion's fleet emerged. Dreadnoughts, hulking leviathans of metal and fire, filled the stars with their looming shadows. Smaller cruisers flanked them, prowling like wolves. And at their center was Ulkor Veskar's flagship, a jagged fortress that gleamed like an open wound. The comms crackled with Veskar's voice, venomous and mocking. Earth's last defenders cower behind their dying planet. How fitting. Your kind will leave no trace, Vane. Nothing but ash. Elias allowed himself a small, humorless smile. We'll see about that. He turned to the bridge crew, his voice clear and resolute. Signal the bait fleet. It's time to start the hunt. Admiral Holt's fleet surged into motion, engines flaring as they fired into the Zarethian forward lines before breaking away, seeming to flee. Vesker's dreadnoughts lunged forward, their engines roaring like beasts chasing prey. On Mars, railguns hidden in old mining facilities locked on, and the first volley roared through space, a rain of steel that struck the Dominion ships with deadly precision. Explosions lit up the void, shockwaves rippling across the dark. Vesker's dreadnoughts fired back, but the railguns held long enough to pull them deeper. Commander, Calder said, breathless as his systems pulsed with life, the sleeper fleets are ready, waiting for your word. Elias turned to the stars, where Vesker's forces loomed ever closer, like predators closing their jaws. He spoke one word, calm as a whisper before the storm. Now. From the darkness beyond Earth, the sleeper fleets roared to life. Ships blacker than the void descended in perfect synchrony, their weapons blazing with white-hot fury. They struck like avenging titans, hammering into Vesker's forces from every angle, turning the battlefield into a firestorm of light and ruin. And as explosions tore through the Zarethian ranks, Elias Vane watched in silence, a single thought burning in his mind. The trap had been sprung, the storm had begun. The void above Earth burned like a dying sun. The Zarethian fleet, once an unstoppable wall of steel and fire, now cracked and crumbled beneath the fury of humanity's awakening. Sleeper ships, ancient, black as death, moved like shadows through the chaos, their cannons erupting in white-hot brilliance, tearing holes into dreadnought hulls. Vesker's armada flailed like a cornered beast, its confidence shattered. On the Resolute's bridge, the hum of energy weapons and the pulse of tactical updates vibrated through the air. Elias Vane stood at the hollow table, face illuminated by the flickering image of Earth surrounded by battle. His gray eyes, sharp as tempered steel, absorbed the chaos, reading it like a battlefield map etched in fire. "Status?" he barked, his voice cutting through the chatter. "Zarethian flagship has taken heavy damage," Jorn reported, sweat dripping from his brow as he scanned the readings. "Their shield integrity is failing, but they're not retreating, sir." "They're holding the line," Elias murmured, his tone tinged with something darker than anger, understanding. "Vesker won't run. His pride won't let him." A crackle of static interrupted him. Calder's voice came through the comms, hoarse but triumphant. "Commander, the sleeper fleet systems are holding. We've got 2 more clusters emerging from the dark. This is it. Every card's on the table." Elias's fingers hovered over the map, watching as the new fleets emerged like wraiths, flanking Vesker's forces and cutting through their disoriented ships. Earth's skies were no longer a battlefield, they were a reckoning. Jorn looked up, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and terror. "Sir, we're winning!" "Not yet," Elias corrected, his gaze fixed on the Zarethian flagship, the massive fortress at the heart of the chaos, its hull glowing red with molten wounds. "Not until Veskar is finished." The bridge crew exchanged glances, the weight of the moment settling over them like a physical thing. Jorn broke the silence. "Sir, their flagship's weapons are priming. They're targeting Earth's surface." The words hit like a fist. Elias's mind sharpened, the sounds of the bridge drowning into a distant hum. He could see it, their last act of spite, a death blow meant to take humanity with them. "Prepare a boarding team," Elias ordered, his voice like cold iron. Jorn stared at him. "Boarding, sir." Elias turned to face him, his expression unrelenting. "We take that ship, Lieutenant. Veskar dies by our hand, not by the void. If Earth burns, we burn with it." Calder's voice crackled through again, disbelief lacing his words. "Are you insane? That flagship's surrounded by a fleet. You'll never get close enough to—" "I'll get close enough," Elias cut him off, his voice calm, resolute. "Patch me through to Zira." Moments later, Admiral Holt's face flickered into view. Her dark eyes met Elias's across the distance, the 2 of them warriors sharing the same grim battlefield. "Commander, your fleets have Vesker cornered. Give me the order and we'll finish him from here." "No," Elias replied. "I need his ship intact. His death must be seen, must be felt." Zira hesitated, then nodded. "I'll clear a path for you. But this is madness, Elias. Don't make me mourn you." "Not today," he replied, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Minutes later, the Resolute's hangar roared to life as Elias and a hand-picked team prepared to board. The shuttle's engines pulsed beneath them, filling the space with a rising hum, while outside the battlefield raged on. Explosions bloomed in the void, brilliant as dying stars, the sleeper fleets pressing the Zarethians closer toward ruin. "Ready?" Elias asked, his voice steady as he turned to his team. Calder, strapped into his seat, grunted, "Define ready. This feels like the part where we die." Jorn smirked, his rifle clutched tightly. "If we're lucky." Elias allowed himself a ghost of a smile. "Luck has nothing to do with it." The shuttle launched, bursting from the Resolute's hull like a spear hurled into the heart of the Zarethian fleet. Around them, enemy fire streaked past, lighting up the cockpit with flashes of red and white. Zira's fleet surged into action, drawing the enemy fire and carving open a narrow path to Veskar's flagship. Inside, Elias sat silent, his gaze fixed forward. His pulse was steady, his thoughts clear. He remembered the burning skies of New Eridani. He remembered the Zarethian broadcast, Veskar's mocking voice calling humanity insects. Now, as they streaked toward the Dominion's crown jewel, Elias felt only cold purpose. "Impact in 10 seconds!" the pilot shouted. The shuttle's hull groaned as it slammed into the flagship's docking bay, the sound a bone-rattling thud that echoed through every nerve. The rear hatch hissed open, and Elias was the first out, rifle raised, boots pounding against metal. "Move!" he barked, his voice a whip crack. The team swept forward in tight formation, cutting through Zarethian resistance. Plasma bolts streaked past them, burning hot against the air. Elias fired with precision, every shot a death knell for the Dominion. They pushed deeper, advancing toward the ship's core. The corridors hummed with the vibration of the engines, pulsing like veins in a dying beast. At the heart of the flagship, Ulkor Veskar waited. They breached the command center in a hail of gunfire and smoke. Veskar stood at the far end of the chamber, his massive frame silhouetted against a view of the burning battlefield. His armor glinted black and gold, but his expression was no longer mocking. It was rage. It was fear. "You come here to die, human," Veskar snarled, his voice a deep, guttural growl. Elias stepped forward, his rifle lowered. The hum of the engines vibrated beneath his feet, the air electric with tension. "No, warlord," Elias said, his voice calm, steady. "I came here to finish what you started." Veskar roared, lunging forward, but Elias was ready. A single shot, clean, precise, rang out, piercing the warlord's chest. Veskar staggered, falling to his knees. Blood, dark and alien, pooled at his feet. Elias stepped closer, towering over the dying warlord. "You thought us insects," he said softly, "but you forgot. Even the smallest flame can burn down a forest." Veskar's eyes widened as his last breath left him, his body slumping to the floor. "Commander," Calder's voice crackled through the comms, "the flagship's losing power. We need to move." "Detonate the core," Elias ordered, turning away. "This ship dies here." The team sprinted back through the corridors as alarms blared. The hum of the engines grew louder, building toward an inevitable explosion. They reached the shuttle just as the flagship began to tear itself apart, the walls trembling, sparks raining like falling stars. As they launched into the void, the Zerethian flagship detonated in a blinding eruption of fire and light, rippling across the Dominion's ranks. The Zerethian fleet, leaderless and shattered, faltered. Ships turned, fleeing into the void. Elias watched from the shuttle window, his face expressionless. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Later aboard the Resolute, Elias delivered one final broadcast. His image flickered across every human fleet, every remaining Dominion channel, carried across starlight to the galaxy beyond. "This is Commander Elias Vane of Earth. To those who doubted us, you now know the truth. We are humanity. We will not kneel. We will not be broken. Let this day be a warning. Cross us again, and you will regret it." He paused, his gaze unyielding. "To the oppressed, to those who fear their chains, we are proof that no empire is eternal. Stand, and the stars will remember your name." The camera cut, and silence fell across the void. Outside the viewport, the sleeper fleets moved into position, dark titans guarding Earth like watchful sentinels. The sky, once filled with fire, was clear again. Elias stood at the bridge, looking out at the pale blue planet below. Humanity had been underestimated, scorned, but now the galaxy knew. They had not been broken. They had risen, and their fire would light the stars for generations to come. For humanity, this was not the end. It was only the beginning.